Hi everyone, welcome to my new little webinar today. I'm sure you're well aware I'm doing a series of webinars, weekly webinars, to help sewers all over the globe. I'm glad you joined me last week. Some of you joined me last week on my first webinar, which was about inserting invisible zips into dresses or whatever you were going to make. And I hope that helped many of you. Now I'm going to keep my little webinars brief because I don't want you to get bored of me and I don't want to be bored myself. But my webinars and my tutorials will be very short and brief, and hopefully they will help many of you along your sewing journey. Now today I'm just going to talk a few little topics here, and the first will be, because I do lots of hand stitching, so if you do lots of hand stitching I do suggest you invest in a thimble and practice with a thimble while you're watching TV, the action of pushing the thimble through. In the old days, apparently I learned, well, my old 94-year-old tailor told me that the apprentices used to have their fingers tied up with string, so you could not use those fingers, and the action is with the index and your other finger, and you're just pushing through the needle. So you just get your fabric or whatever. So you can sit watching your TV and just sit, and then just with your, see, the thimble, just push the thimble through and just practice doing that action. And you should become pretty efficient with the way you hand stitch things. And that I cannot hand stitch anymore without having a thimble. And it becomes quicker. You get really very fast when you know how to use the thimble and the needle. So there's about the thimble. Now let's talk about needles for hand stitching. Now I use what we call betweens. These are called betweens, and they're from a company called John James. You can see it here, John James. You can get it from tailor merchants everywhere. I'm sure in your country you'll be able to pick these up. Now, probably a lot of you will use sharps. Sharps are longer needles. So they're just general needles, but when you specialise in doing lots of hand stitching and very fine hand stitching, you should get these betweens. Now these betweens range from, I think, size 1 to size 9. I've got a few here. I'm just going to just quickly show you here. Now you can see here I've got a size 3. I use between size 2 and 3 for thread marking and basting things together. Now the lower the number, the more longer the needle is. The higher the number is, the shorter the needle gets. So this is what we call a size 3. The one that's very fine is a size 8. So I'm going to show you here. I'm going to put them here now. So I'm going to try and zoom in for you here. So this is a size 2. There you got a size 3 and you got a size 8. You can see the difference. This size 8 is very small. Okay, so you've got, so you can see the difference. This size 8 is very fine, it's very small, and you've got a size 2 and size 3 next to each other. So I use size 2s and 3s for thread marking or basting things. So I use these when I'm doing little buttonholes by hand, the size 8, because I need a very fine needle. So these are called betweens. So I suggest you actually try and invest in these. And this company is called John James, so you can Google it and get these needles, betweens. They range from size 1 to size 9. Now, when I'm thread marking or basting things, I use a proper thread here. It's very weak. You can see how weak that is. And if you're doing lots of hand stitching or you're tacking things together, I do suggest you get these basting threads. I call them thread marking threads, but basting threads, they're virtually the same term really. So you can get these from the tailor trimming merchants. I'll just zoom back out for you here. So try and invest in these. They're not much, you know. And Richard James in London sell them, and Dugdale Bross sells them, and I think other tailoring merchants will sell them. So just put tailor merchants, you'll get. And these are called thread marking threads or basting threads. And they usually come in like an off-white. So there we have that. Now, push that aside there. Now, I just briefly want to talk about scissors. Now, I do suggest you all invest in a good pair of scissors. Don't get cheap ones, please, because you've got to get some scissors to cut your fabrics out, and they've got to be accurate. Now I use these are hand-me-downs. These are beautiful. These were actually made in England. This is Wilkinson and Sons, beautiful. They've got to be very old. I think they could be 50, 60 plus years old. And these are hand-me-down from some of my tailors. These are 12-inch, what we call shears, scissors. We call them shears in the trade. And they've got the balance, and that's the beauty. And that's the secret when you're cutting fabrics out. They've got to be balanced. And also, as I put on my course, I talk about this briefly on my course, on my online courses. Always, when you're cutting out, please do not pick up the scissors. Always have it resting on the table. I know some of you cut on the floor, you don't have cutting tables, but whichever surface you use, always have the scissors resting on the table or the floor, if you're going to be cutting on the floor. And then just, you see, you do not lift up the scissors. It's wrong. And you'll get a better cut this way. So this is shears, and these are 12-inch shears, and I have very many different pairs. I think this is a 10-inch, and I've got an 8-inch, and they're okay. The smaller they go, the more difficult you are, especially if you're going to be cutting, you know, quite a lot of patterns out, you know, your dresses or trousers. I do suggest you try and get the biggest shears if you can, or the biggest scissors. Now I know a lot of you will use the plastic ones. I'm not really keen on the plastic ones, but I know they're a lot lighter for you. And some of you that suffer from some problems with arthritis, they are okay. You know, I mean, they are lighter, but don't forget, the lighter the scissors are, the more difficult it is to cut fabric out, really. You need a good weight, like these. They've got a good weight, and they're balanced. So they're balanced when you're actually cutting the fabric out. Always make sure the tip is as sharp as you can get it. I know people will try and sharpen their scissors through various ways of tin foil or whatever methods they do, but if you've got a good pair of scissors, please go to a professional that sharpens your scissors correctly, and you'll be fine with that. So these are the scissors. So I mean, the plastic ones are okay, but I've got used to using the metal ones. And if you're able to use the metal ones, then I do suggest you try and get the metal ones. But if you've got problems with your hand, then the plastic ones are fine. But try and get some good quality scissors to get the best ones you can. Some of my scissors will be £100, £80, £120. You can get some pretty good ones for £30, £40. But the cheap ones, £5, £10, £15, you know, you got to try them out. So I'm not going to knock them, but if they work for you, they work for you. But try and invest in some good quality scissors if you can. So now we're going to go to my sewing machine, and we're going to talk about sewing machine tensions, sewing machine needles, and handling your fabrics under the machine itself. Right, everyone, we're at my sewing machine now. As you can see, I've got an industrial sewing machine which I use for all of my work. This is a needle feed, so it's a bit different from a lock stitch machine that has a different kind of feed dog the way it works, but I'm not going to talk about this, but we're just going to generally talk about needles. Now, you can see I've got some needles here. I usually use for my work, or most of the time, I use what we call size 14 needles. Can you see that? But they go up. So when I'm doing jeans or denims, which is very thick fabric, I use size 18s, and I do suggest if you are working with heavy fabrics to use a size 18 needle, which domestic machines, I think they go up to size 18, if I remember, to get your larger size when you're working with very, very heavy fabrics. Now the rule of thumb is this: the lighter the fabric is, like chiffons and silks and stuff like that, and georgettes, then use a size 10, use a finer needle. Okay, so in the needle way, the lower that is, the more finer the needle is. So the lower the number is, like a size 10, then it's a very fine needle. When you go up to size 12, 14, 16, 18, they become bigger needles. So always that rule of thumb, you can break it if you want to, I don't mind. Usually if you're using very light fabrics, lightweight fabrics like chiffons and georgettes and things like that, then get a very fine needle, get a size 10. If you're using heavy fabrics, get a size 12. So I go between a size 12 and a 14 for my work. Most of my work I do. Now, so there's the needles. So of course these are industrial needles, but you'll have domestic needles that are exactly the same. Right, now let's talk about, I just want to briefly talk about threads. Now there's various threads here and they're all different thicknesses. Now for my kind of work I use coats. Coats are some of the best you can get. There's coats Epic. There's coats, I think Moon, which is a bit of a lesser quality. I'm sure a lot of you will use the Coats Moon 120s. But I use the Epics, which is a lot more, it's a bit more better quality. And in the trade, we kind of use Coats Epic. Now I use what we call 80s. So this is the thickness and it's a strong thread. So I use this for most of my work in suit making and dressmaking. Now, of course, if it's a very sheer fabric in dressmaking couture, I will use 120s. And most of you probably use 120s in most of your work. So 120s is less thickness and it's a weaker thread. And a lot of people will use this in overlocking as well, the overlocking as well. So they're 120s and majority in the industry we use 80s. Now, I know sometimes we'll use 120s because I use very fine fabrics. So the thicker the fabric you're using, then get a stronger thread. If you've got like a very sheer fabric, then maybe use a 120, whatever. Now I've got a very fine thread here. This will be my overlocking thread, because for overlocking you don't want to be bulky. So these is a 160s coat, no Atlas. So it's a 160s. And I'm sure you can get the smaller reels of these, of course, because I do lots of work. I need the bigger 5,000 meters reels, but you can get the smaller 1,000 meter reels. I think you can get 500 meters and things like that. So they're the threads. So just always remember, the thicker the fabric you're going to use, then get a stronger thread. If you've got quite lightweight fabrics, then get a 120s. So hopefully that's helped you there. Put that aside. Now let's just talk about our machine a little bit and the tensions of the machine here. Now I'm just going to get my fabric here for you. Let me just put this up there. So now the way the feed dog works, I've got a slightly different, because I've got a needle feed, but it's still be the similar principle. Now, when you sew, I'm just going to just quickly show you. When you sew, the feed dog actually, the bottom feed dog actually goes faster than it'll pull the bottom layer through much faster than the top layer. So when you're going to be sewing, don't actually put your just fingers on top. So when you're going to be machining, don't have your hands there, just have your fingers on top lightly and let the presser foot, let the feed dog put it through. Okay, so just guide that. Can you see? I'm not going to go all the way just to show you. I need my, right. Now, can you see here? This has pulled it through. Because this is quite a strong thread. Can you see there's a little wave there? Can you see that's pulled it through? That means there's some tension problems here. So I'm just going to now if you've got slight tension problems here, it's waving. Slight wave there on the side. You do not want that. So that means there's some tension issue. So I'm going to give you a little tip here. If you put your presser foot down and if you pull your thread through, that should go in quite easily. And also underneath should be going. So they are going quite easily. If there's too much tension, see your little tension disc here, which most machines, well, all machines will have. You'll have a tension disc here. Let me just get this for you there. Undo it. Lessen the tension. You go anti-clockwise and you go clockwise to increase the tension. Also, many sewers will neglect, you've got like this pressure, see at the top here? It's like a pressure screw, and that actually will put the pressure. So this pressure screw here, this actually puts the pressure on the actual presser foot itself. Now a good way to see if if it's too much or too little. If you lift up your presser foot when it's down, and if you've got a little bit of tension there, that's fine. Now I'm just going to release that a little bit. So just play around with this pressure. I call it a pressure screw. So this pressure screw here, so just undo that if you feel that you need less tension on this presser foot down here. Can you see that there? You don't want to have too much pressure on this foot when you're doing lightweight fabrics. The heavyweight fabrics, then you increase this pressure screw. And a lot of sewers neglect this. So always remember that if you're getting problems with this wave. Now I'm going to show you another way of handling fabrics if you get problems with this little wave here. Now usually you'll get it, the lighter the fabric is, you'll have more of a problem. So I'm just going to show you a couple of ways. Now you can actually, if you put your, bring this back down now, if you put your hand on the bottom layer and just slightly be taut with it here as you sew. See here now, I'm going to bring this out a little bit so you can get a better view here. Let me just get that. Okay, that's good. So if you bring a little bit of pressure on here, don't be crazy and be too taut, just a little bit of taut. Leave the top layer the way it is and just feed that through. Okay, can you see? I'm putting a little bit of pressure there on the bottom layer. I'll just bring this up here. I'll take this off here. Can you see this now? That's nearly correct. That's fine. So you can do it that way. Also, you can, I need my little clippers. I forgot my clippers. Never mind. I'll just use my fingers. So you can do that way, be a bit taut, just on the bottom layer. Also, if you've got really lightweight fabrics and you're having that problem, just be taut. Get your fingers behind the machine, behind the foot, and in front, and just be a bit taut on behind and the front, and we'll just stitch that. Yeah. So behind, be a bit taut, and in the front. And usually on lightweight fabrics, this happens. So that's what I would do. And I don't need to go all the way to the end. You'll get the gist of what I'm trying to say to you. And keep that there now. That's perfect. So there's 3 different ways, methods to actually handle your fabric under the machine if you've got some tension problems. So always look at your tension disc here. Either increase it or decrease it, and this pressure screw at the top as well. So look at that. Now, also, my last tip for you here. Sometimes the tensions between the top thread and the bottom thread will not be equal. So if I'm just going to increase this deliberately, this top thread tension, I'm going to go really, really increase it. I'm just going to exaggerate. Right, let's just undo that. Now you can see it's pulling. I'm going to bring this back down for you here. Can you see that it's pulling there? You can actually see it here. And also, you'll see little bobbling effects from, I don't think the camera can pick it up. You'll see little bobbling at the top. That means the top tension has pulled up from underneath the thread. And you can see it occurring on top. You don't get a nice line. And it's pulling as well. So, you know, if you get this bobbling effect at the top, to actually decrease this until you get a nice flat and it's not pulling and there's no bobbling at the top. Conversely, if you get that on the bottom, you'd have to decrease the bottom thread. Look at your manuals on your machine, because most machines will be different. You might have a top loader. You'd have to take out the bobbin case itself. Well, there's no real bobbin case. The little where the bobbin sits in, you'd have to take that out and increase or decrease that. And I think they're called top loaders, and you got your normal front loader where you go in, and usually I would go for all the domestic machines I get, which are good. I always try and get one. It's what we call a front loader that goes in with a bobbin case. And then here, can you see you got a little screw here? Then you increase it or decrease it. And you've got to balance out the threads on either side. So there we have that. So hopefully that's helped you all, everyone, and I will see you on my next webinar, which will be next week. So on that note, thank you very much, and I'll see you.